Live. Wait a second. Yeah, okay. Looks like we're going live. All right. Okay, so welcome everybody to yet another week of the Striving Novelist Support Group. Anybody who has not been here before, this is basically where we just chat about our weekly struggles trying to be writers with a capital W or lowercase w. Um, but so anyway, first thing that we do is going around and everybody kind of talk about like what's going on the last week with their personal writing. So who would like to volunteer first to talk about maybe what a successful and fantastic week they had, Michele? Oh,
I'll
Well, go ahead, Margie.
Oh,
okay.
did somebody else say they were going to start? Sorry.
No, go ahead, Margie's great. Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
So, so I said I was going to get my 3 scenes written. I did get them written, not as soon as I thought. I sent them off last night to my writing group. And I went back and forth with one of my beta readers to give me feedback before I sent them off. So I feel pretty good about that. And now I have a big challenge facing me because I need in my last chapter, which I've broken down into smaller chapters, I need to change my ending to enhance it. And it involves writing more than one scene for that. It involves a lot of different things. And so I have to figure out how to approach it and do a bunch of research because it involves some of the 900 churches in Rome, sending my characters on a wild goose chase looking for someone. And so I'll have to figure all that out. And but an interesting thing, I talked to Susan Beck last night, Beckman, and she told me about this person that she was seeing, she was dating, and he took her on a search of all the churches in Rome that had Bernini sculptures. They went to every church in Rome that had a Bernini sculpture. And I thought, oh my God, that's such a coincidence. That's so much like my novel. So it gave me the idea, though, to have something that these individuals are certain that they know that they have to find in this specific church that they're hoping to find this person at, because she had mentioned something specific, like a Bernini sculpture or something. So anyhow, the magic of talking to your fellow writers about things.
It sounds very Dan Brown, actually.
Yeah.
Going on searching through all of the 900 churches in Rome for something. Sounds like yeah.
It'll be fun. Anyhow, that's what I got done.
Very good.
So I'll jump in. I had a really exciting week because I, after 28 attempts at getting a personal essay published, it was picked up by Gulfstream Magazine to be published in their fall. So thank you. I'm very excited about that. But what I'm more excited about is giving testimony about not quitting and not taking rejection personally, because the range of different types of magazines that it was, some of them, it was like oh, we loved it, but not quite right. Those type of comments, it was getting very frustrating. And I was thinking about working on it again and redoing it. And then I threw it out there to like 10 different places and it got picked up. So just be patient with the process, because a lot of times it's just about the right fit. So I did that. I did not get my article done that I spoke about last week. I was going to write an article for our Story Street website. But I did think about it, and I'm going to continue thinking about it. And yeah, it wasn't a super productive writing week, but it was a productive submitting week.
Oh, you also got your thesis.
I got my
back, right?
thesis back, yes, and I was very excited about that. And so that was the last thing I had to do for my master's program. I'm celebrating that as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Plenty of reasons for some extra drinks this week, right?
yes, and I got
Yeah.
some wonderful feedback last night from my writing group about a scene I really need to work on. So I think that it was a productive week, even though there was not a lot of forward writing.
I
I
have
can
to say,
follow that. Sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to jump. I'm sorry. I was just going to congratulate Michelle on not just the publication, but the persistence. Because 28, I don't know that I have ever pushed a story out to 28 places, and that's how it gets published. So
Mhm.
part of the process is resubmit. So great job and extra congratulations there.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Actually, it's
everyone.
inspiring because I also have a personal essay. I think I've pitched it to about 4 places and they've all rejected it. And I was thinking about, but it was mostly something I wrote for myself because it helped me process a very traumatic experience I had in 2020, 2021. But maybe I'll keep trying because you never know when it might even inspire someone else who's going through a hard time. So
Yes,
thanks for
Elisa,
that.
definitely. Also, I found the theme for this was this is the second time I've had something published that fit a theme. And I
Mhm.
really think there's something to be said for that. This was their last issue was first words, and this issue is going to be final words. And this is an essay about dying and losing people. So it was just the right fit at the right time for the right theme. And I do think that's something to consider. And when you're deciding how many places you want to send something to.
Yeah. Okay, I can go. I since I told myself that I was going to give myself a break after writing very intensely for the last so many months, and but I wanted to work on a short story that I shared with my writing group and that I submitted for New York City Midnights, and I'm waiting that response. I can't submit it anywhere else until the end of that round, and it's the 1st of April, so it's almost there. So I wanted to polish it to have it ready to send out the moment that that I'm available to, and it's really timely. And actually, I'm waiting to be able to submit this because the story is about an abduction of a kid here in Mexico. It's fictionalized, but last week they found they called it a narco rancho. It's a ranch where uh, with a lot of drug trafficking, and they found shoes, backpacks, T-shirts, boys, women, uh, crematories, piece of bone. I mean, the pictures even reminded me of like the Holocaust, and it's something that is happening in Mexico today that is really, really very relevant. And I really want to get the story out there. So I'm just waiting for the right time. So I did polish that. I would like to have another round of critique with my writing group, just so I can have it really, really like perfect to go. And then I have another story that I also wrote for New York City Midnights, but it was a 250 word piece, and I'm expanding it. And I started. What I did is I changed the point of view because now it's in the eyes of a neighbor, not of the character that was my main character in my microfiction. So it's interesting, and I started that, and so I didn't finish, which was my goal, but I did work on it. I maybe more, but I did give myself. I read more, like did other things for leisure this week. But but so it was an okay week.
Um, I also worked on like the 250 word story that we got back. Like I was in the same NYC Midnights, and I got really great feedback. And so I just implemented that feedback. I'm gonna keep it a micro fiction. Like it's just I think that's what it's the length that's good for the story. But I took that feedback and it was like nitpicky in the best way possible. Like, I mean that as like, thank you so much for being nitpicky. Because NYC Midnights gives great feedback, and it made me realize like these little tweaks, like they're so small, but they change it so much. Like they make it so much better. So that was really helpful for my writing. I know it's gonna be helpful in other things because like I was able to say like, oh, like that little change made such a big difference. So that's one thing I did this week. I wrote a book review that I had just been stalling on for some reason. I really enjoyed the book, like really enjoyed it, but I was just stalling on writing the review. And I have like a little backlog of reviews that I need to write because I don't know, I've just been not in a great space writing wise, and I've been stalling, and I'm trying really hard to like just push through that. So that's where that is. But it was really fun to work on that NYC Midnights because I had like feedback right there, and then I got to see the change and like read them side by side, and that was fun.
My stating goal last week was to do the business of writing, and by that I conclude means pretty much everything but the writing, and I did accomplish some of that. I realized, thanks to Michelle's success this week, that I need to be submitting a lot more. I think the most I've ever submitted something is 3 times, and that's ridiculous. The last short story I finished, I got a lot of positive feedback on it, and I need to just push that out. I've gotten personalized rejections at least, which we all know is better than standardized rejection. So I just need to be more persistent with that, uh, and um, uh, and I, uh, I made some progress on my treatment a for turning a short film into a long film, into a feature-length film, and it's not ready to be sent to the guy who's I'm excited about, who's reading it, and he's read the short film. Um, but it's progress. I haven't made enough progress. I realized, especially with this case, that I'm suffering from a lack of confidence, and I just have to get past that. It's not a thing that I can continue. I mean, if my dream of writing is also to be read, then I can't let myself be held back by a lack of confidence. It's kind of like a different kind of writer's block. Uh, uh, it's not a struggle to write; it's a struggle to push my writing out there, to say that something is done and now it's time for it to go. I'm having that kind of block now, and it's just practice. I just got to get past it. Thank you, Michele, for your good example this week.
Yes, thank you for being so successful and motivating everybody. I can't. I don't think I've done 10 submissions on a story. Like I spent an awful lot of time. I'm trying to hone my writing in the last couple of years, but not actually, well, trusting it and trying to put it out there. I've mostly just been write it, put it aside, right? It's like the Kilgore Trout character from Kurt Vonnegut. You know, he just wrote everything and then threw it away. Like he was constant, like a very very famous author, just writing everything and throwing it in the trash. So um, that sounds, I mean, it sounds accurate. This week I started though, so I am going to continue submitting. That's going to, well, sorry, that's more of an end of end of stream thing we talk about next week, but that's going to be my thing. Continue submitting. One thing I started doing this week is and maybe this is something we can talk about. Like, I started doing some like a morning writing and trying to do like a story of a day. And I'm not stressing if I don't get it done, but I actually did. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but like just doing like a scribble in the morning. Um, I don't like the idea of I never got along well with journaling, but just like a little just yeah, writing while doing coffee, whatever I write, it doesn't matter what it is. And then a story of the day. Uh, Again, doesn't have to complete or even be a good story or anything, just something. So that's something that I have ended up doing some writing, even if it's not necessarily dedicated writing time, just in some small blocks, like 5-10 minutes.
Michael, what do you mean by a story
Okay.
of a day, like of the day? Like, are
Yeah.
you reading a story or are
So
you writing a whole story? Or
no, writing a story of the day, and it could just be like the idea of a story. It could be like a kind of sketchy, could be like the beginning of a story, could be kind of a character, could just be like it doesn't finish, just like a prompt, an idea, just like I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a story. What's this? What I'm going to create a story right now. What am I making? And just like writing something out. And it could be horrible, and that's okay. I don't care if it's good. Or the idea is just to do one and make a paragraph or a page or something about it. And it can ramble too, like me right now. Um, but it's not so I just two different things. Now this is something I picked up from some other somebody who was meaning something else, or basically it was kind of a journaling thing, but I heard story of the day, like they were using it as what happened today, and this is what my day was, and this was the main event that happened this day. And that's kind of, a journaling thing that's sounds cool. But I heard the idea story of the day and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to try and write a whole story, but maybe I can write like, throw 100 words in or something, a page, 250, make something. And maybe, I can start it's cruising through these pages in the future in several months and look back and put a couple of them together and actually come up with something out of it, or something. I used to carry a little a notebook around, pocket notebook, and just write things throughout the day. And this is just something like I'm trying to make sure I'm also doing it by hand, just to make sure that to make it more physically engaging with my writing, or to engage my rather than typing it. So both of these things, I'm just right with the coffee. And then at the end of the day, I'm doing both ends of the day. At the end of the day, try and do. I don't have to do it every day. The idea is, hey, there's a place for it every day. But I'm not going to. This is not important writing. I am not going to give myself guilt over it, because then that's just going to be counterproductive. But the idea is, hey, try and find some space in the morning to do this. I have kids. If it doesn't work out because I have to do parental things, that's fine. In the evening, same story. I have other things going on right now. If this doesn't happen, it's okay. It's just like a little, oh, instead of doom scrolling, maybe I should do this for like 5 minutes at the beginning of the day and 5-10 minutes at the end of the day or something. But as a result, I've written several days most of the days this week in one or the other or both of those. Um,
I love that. I think I do journal in the morning. Um, but and sometimes I just even write I have really vivid dreams. So whenever they're stuck with me, I need to like get them out. Um, Hence I wrote about a dream. No wonder. But anyway, the thing is that, but I love the idea of doing like a short creative thing. I do it mostly nonfiction, like more my personal writing, but I could do fiction. That would be really interesting. What I do when I get inspiration, I write it to myself in the WhatsApp, so it comes back to my own WhatsApp, so it's just there. Or I if I'm in a hurry, I make, or if I'm walking, because I walk every day like an hour, and almost every time I get an idea from something I'm listening to, for something I see or whatever. And so I make a voice note to myself, or remember this idea, blah, 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 blah. And then when I go back, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even remember that I thought about that. It's incredible how sometimes we can have moments of inspiration and just let them go. So I think it's great to have a space, and also the fact that you're not doing it like mandatory, because it takes away the guilt, as you're saying, and it doesn't matter. It's just a win. If you do it, it's great. And if you don't do it, it's great too. So yeah, I think that's a great way to get ideas for stories and even future characters and stuff.
I think it would be a great topic for a later discussion. Where do our ideas come from? For me, the walking concepts are really important. But sometimes if I'm listening to music I really love, the ideas just don't come. Um, Sometimes if I have my headphones on in silence, the headphones just keep people from talking to me, and more ideas come. So I think that's a good discussion that we might put in the list of things to talk about later. But I really also think that it's time to jump into our discussion if we're going to do it.
Fair enough. Worth. I will point out, just for capturing stuff on the go, like Apple Notes now has been updated to where it'll take a voice memo in there and transcribe it for you. If you can just have that. I don't know if that is true, like the Google Notes thing as well, that whatever they have on the Android, but if you don't have a other way of doing it, like that'll get you a transcription too. So for those people who are walkers. Um, but yeah, anyway, today we were going to talk about motivating. Um, Not like walking. That's a different kind of motivation. Um, but writing motivation. Like how do we keep going? What are some ways that, what are some challenges that you faced? I think we've all faced some challenges, this year. Um, and how have you met, or is there anything that you think that you might want to try to, or other people have done to help work through declining motivation for writing? Um, I think every writer faces this, so there's got to be plenty of anecdotal ideas out there.
Well, Michael, what you were saying
Oh, go ahead,
about,
Josie.
sorry, what you were saying about like writing like that, I completely forgot that for a while, like a year or two ago, I was doing like just a little microfiction piece every day. And it was not like, they weren't great, but they were like these germinations of ideas. And how much, like, I really believe that creativity is a muscle. And that like if you're not practicing it, it gets harder and harder to be creative. And but just like any other muscle, you don't have to work it out every day. Like that's not like, you know what I mean? But yeah, I really love that. I feel like a low stakes, low pressure, like just write, write something small. Like I can see that helping me get back into writing, because like I have for sure been struggling, and I can see that being really useful to me again, just to like flex the creativity muscle a little bit. And no, there's no pressure, there's no stakes, there's no I want this to be anything, but it is the start of something. So maybe if it's something that I want to come back to later, it's there.
I find that, oh, Michele, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Uh, I was just going to jump in and say I had a professor, and I think it was Gabriel Hawk, who um, was talking about when you're stuck and you're just not writing or you don't feel like writing, to pick an author you love and sit down, open to a page of a book, and just start writing, handwriting, copying what they wrote on a pad. And it just opens up that creative pathway, and you just write it as an exercise, and it kind of gets your wheels churning, and then it motivates you because somewhere along the way that particular author motivated you. um, and it's just a good exercise to break that, because sometimes my lack of motivation is I mean, there's so many different things. There's distractions, there's laziness, there's
Mm.
but the biggest one for me is the fear of getting started again, especially after I've just written something I really like, or I've just put a chapter to bed, or whatever it is. It's this fear that I'm not going to be able to do it. And I have to remind myself I've done it before and I can do it. But either reading or copying, like just handwriting a few paragraphs, it just kind of switches gears and takes that gear away.
You know, I find I usually do long projects, so I spend a lot of time, and I'm the type of person who needs to finish, even if
Mhm.
it's just a draft, but I need to finish it, like because if not, it stays like an unfinished task in the back of my mind, and it's
Mm.
um, it doesn't let me do other things because I need to finish that, which is why I think I struggled having two projects at the same
Mm.
time, because they were both like, you haven't finished this, but you haven't finished this either. So it was just, I, yeah, it was hard for me to go between one and the other. But I find that things like NYC Midnights, which by the way, this Friday kicks off the 100 microfiction, for if anyone, I know Josie. Michelle, are you in?
I'm thinking about it, yeah, because now that I've finished my thesis, I feel like I have time for it.
Yeah, it's a Saturday. We only have 24 hours, so I mean from Friday to Saturday. So, and I really I like those challenges because I've written things that I would never have even thought of and that I really, really liked. And it even like, oh, I can do this genre because I had never even tried it before. But since it forces you to go out of your comfort zone, I feel like that's um, very, very productive. I like that. That's helped. So I try to join like most of the challenges to be able to have that experience, even if it doesn't get me, because even if I don't advance to the next round, I still have a great story. And again, and as Josie said, the feedback is really good, so then you can use it to make it better, and then you can submit it. The only story I've ever published so far started as a New York City Midnights project. So, and it was a fairy tale. I had never written a fairy tale before, and I grabbed my Mexican background and I put it in there, and I thought that it came out really interestingly. Anyway, so I think that joining classes, having this group, talking to people, and joining challenges that take you out of yourself or of your same things. And I get really inspired by the news, especially here in Mexico. I've found I read what's happening in my country, and it's empowering me or motivating me to write more about it. I've found that's something that's coming up more and more, especially in my short stories. And so, yeah, sometimes you can, and even one of my novels that I you've never I did in capstone, and it's been taking a nap for the last 2 years, which I plan to take back. It's based on a news story I heard and then I researched that happened in 2006. So when something like really interesting, I read something that happened that is like, wow, this can be made into, if you morph it, you can do something really cool with it. So yeah. And surprisingly, I've also found inspiration sometimes in Instagram reels. I think that my algorithm already understood that I like things that have to do with psychology and manifestation and stuff like that. And sometimes I get things that are like, there is no time, we are eternal, and this, la, la, la. Like, oh, maybe I can explore that. So even those, and I keep them, I save them in my account to go back to later. So yeah, and writing to myself and giving my remembering myself like in voice notes or whatever, like, this is a really cool idea, just keep it somewhere. So that helps me keep going.
I think there's something interesting or important in what Michele had commented about, like there's different reasons for not wanting to write. And that's like sometimes, like I know Elisa, you said you're motivated by events that happen. Like you find inspiration there, I guess we can say, and I think that's sometimes also that can be demotivating. Like there's an awful lot of mental health uh, degradation lately that I think is a lot of people feel demotivated in a lot of ways, and that it makes it hard to want to do something just for yourself too, and that could be fear. Michele talked about that can be you don't or the confidence that Jack was talking about, like feeling like, oh, I can't get this right, or I don't want to write it wrong, or something like that. There could be a problem in your project that you need to address, right? I think I've mentioned that before. Where like the classic writer's block is, I think I saw some deconstruction that it is. Oh, bye, Margie. Sorry, Margie's leaving. A classic deconstruction of writer's block framed it as often caused by having a problem. You need to advance your story, but there's a problem because something earlier in the story needs to change, and you need to address that, and you're stuck. You want to move forward, but you also don't want to do it wrong because you're going to be writing into the wind or something. So, and having to, you also don't want to change the words that you've already put because they're precious little things. So that's another thing that can happen, or just being busy, finding or being able to tell your family, your significant other, no, sometimes that you are taking a break, going to the coffee shop, the library, the cafe, the wherever you write, the park, you and the pigeons.
I think that's a really good one too for like when you're stuck, is to change where you're writing.
It's a good point.
I have found that whole like, okay, I'm not writing at home for some reason. It's not working. Whether I'm just too distracted or like whatever, or it might not even be like the fault, but to just change your scenery can really like bring back some motivation. Um, Libraries are great places for that.
It's a great one. Do it in your yoga group. Go somewhere else.
Finding ways of creating responsibilities to write, not just like this inspiration concept, but just like I have to write something because I promised my writers group that I'll have something a week and a half from now, and now I've only got 6 days to get it written, and I have to get it written because I have this responsibility to my friends in the writers group, or I'm going to be in this writing contest that's got a deadline, and I have to get something done by that deadline. That sense of creating motivation by creating responsibilities, I think that's something I'm going to try to do a little more of. And I, the other thing is there are different types. The other thing I want to talk about is there are different types of inspiration, and what Michael had to say about writing a bit in the morning, story a day. I can't think like that, but there is a similar thing that I can do, and that is that I'm trying to collect language that's like my brother wrote when he was writing, and I haven't been able to find enough of that, but I know what his voice is, and I have found some of it, and so I think I might try to write some as him. Just get some of his language recorded, because I know what he spoke like, and I know what he wrote like. And that might be a morning thing. Write a paragraph and sing it. And I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that. Get up early and write a paragraph and sing it. Thank you for that, Michael. I got that because I'm in a group, and it's very, right now it feels very motivating to me.
That's an interesting one, because I've done that before, where I'm writing something and I'm like having trouble getting my head around how to go into the scene or something. And I'll be like, man, if only I could write this like this author. And I'm like, oh, well, why don't I just try writing it as that author? And write, because this would really fit the style of my story if I could do. Well, then let's just go ahead, and because I'm still writing it, I'm still making, I'm just trying to put myself, being an actor as a writer, writing as a character who's writing this story, I guess, in some way. Like I don't know, there's got to be like several layers of indirection there, but like I have done that before, where I'm trying to write it, and I'll write it as a certain style in this author's voice, and it'll obviously it's not going to be their writing, but it's going to be and it's going to change as I edit it anyway. But it does help me. I don't know, maybe I can put the responsibility for getting stuff wrong on them or something. I don't know. He screwed up. I didn't. But that does kind of loosen the wheels, and maybe kind of engaging a part of your brain to think in that abstract way, kind of tricking your brain in some
That
way.
just made me think of something. It just made me think of something I do sometimes, which I don't know. This might sound a little goofy, but I if I'm having trouble with a scene, I pick actors to play my characters, and a lot of times they're actors from different ages that might be 60 now, but maybe were when they were 20, or I just get the image in my head of these actors, and I try to imagine the scene, and I might even have music on, and that really helps me start picturing things in 3D. And that just made me think when you said writing in a different voice, or playing with things in different ways, I think is really motivating. And I also thought maybe having somebody who knows your story, somebody in your writing group who knows what you're writing, to give you prompts for your characters if you're stuck. um, Mc- Dr. Maketa, one of our professors that we've all had at one point or another, she throws out writing prompts, and they really are inspiring. But and I love to write a story from a prompt. But if you're working on something specific, it might be fun to have someone who knows your story to give you those prompts. It's just that,
Yeah.
especially if they know exactly kind of where you're stuck.
Yeah. Well, speaking of inspiring writing, I have to just plug her book. She never told me about the ocean, by the way. So it's good. Read some inspirational writing.
It's
Somebody who
amazing, that
writes well.
story.
Um, be careful which actors you choose to be in your story, though. Sometimes they're hard to handle. You don't want like Christian Bale to start ranting in the middle of your
Well, and there's a whole Robert Downey
story.
Jr.
Or
when
something.
he was
He does
having
something
issues.
different every time.
Yeah.
You can't get him to do the same thing every time. You don't want to rewrite the scene, and then he goes off and does something else. So,
Well, and now that he's kind of gotten his life together, I'm very happy for him. But if I had, as a teenager, he might not be so reliable. So I can't have him play my teen characters.
I would just like to mention that I think that's the third time I've heard
And
Michelle
I know
mention Robert Downey
I have a
Jr.
crush. I have a
uh-oh.
crush.
Yeah,
It's a crush that has been like
yeah.
for the last
This
30
is
years.
He's re-entering the Marvel universe as well. He's coming
Yep.
into the Avengers as a different character.
Yep.
Really?
And I think that's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I wish they had held off on that reveal and done it in the middle of the movie like they've done other things. That would have been so like earth-shattering, but they didn't. Speaking of, hey, speaking of, foreshadowing and revealing, and that was, they could have probably. You don't want to overdo it. But that's a good idea. That's another, like, switching your brain, writing as the character, writing as the author, writing. Find a different way to write it. Write it in a different tone. Write it. Maybe focus on a different thing. Maybe you're trying to focus on the action, and you need to. I've done this one too. Like, I have this scene, and these things need to happen, and I'm focused on the things. Have to have the events, the plot, and I'm like, how do I get there? And instead I shift and I try and focus on the tone, the voice, just writing some scene work and write my way in. Right, this is the tone that I want. I want this to be a little bit humorous, or I want this to be, lyrical, or I want this to be very, you know, hard boiled or something, and focus on writing in that voice, and then eventually, like, you'll get to a point in the scene that a thing happens, and then your plot continues.
You know what? I just realized my characters in Synchronicity. The Synchronicity started as a play, and the four main characters, excluding Tina, existed in the first version when we were 17, and when I was 17. And physically, these were friends of mine who played these characters. So even if that was almost 30 years ago, I still remember it quite vividly. So I take their physicality and their quirks and the way they speak and everything from the actual actors. Yeah. The only character that's new is Tina, but Tina is based on my middle child, and so I also took a lot of her mannerisms and stuff, and the way that she would have reacted to the situation. But I maybe sometimes it helps. And I remember getting stuck. Andy was really really difficult to me because she's very sensitive, and I'm not sensitive. And my husband, who's not a writer, but who I discuss everything with, he's a businessman and like has nothing. He wouldn't read a novel in his life, but he listens to my ranting, or to when I vent or when I have ideas. And he said, why don't you imagine it being so, when I was really really stuck with Andy, like, think of a person and how that person would react. So sometimes even taking some things from someone and saying, okay, this fits this character. And even, and I don't know if you do this, but I found myself even in front of the mirror, like doing gestures and seeing myself, or even paying attention to how other people make gestures, and taking into account, uh, and taking them into my characters, because some people have really really quirky gestures, or very like specific. I had a student who was a ballerina who would crack her toes on the floor when she would get up to present in class. And so one foot and then the other, and she would be cracking her toes like one. And it was so, I remember it so vividly that I use it in Tina, because that's what ballerina, she was a ballerina, that's what she did. So anyway, sometimes, and also add something else that I just finished the book called Cues by Vanessa Van Edwards. I don't know if you've heard about her. And she's talking about how to be like best perceived by people. But some of the takeaways that I found really interesting in the book is that she describes how we interpret cues, like gestures. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So maybe I can use, like, she even has a glossary of gestures and how they are either warm or competent. She divides them in that two categories. Like, oh, so I'm going to take this list of gestures and just have it in my mind, and know that if I put them inside my characters, they're going to be giving this specific cues to the reader, even because we're used to interpreting that unconsciously, like how people act and move, talks in themselves and not just their words. So
I think we've come up with a bunch of really good. I'm actually surprised with like the actual number of practical techniques that or ideas, something to try, tricks and doodads to knobs to turn that we've come up with in this one. Somebody should compile these and make an article about it for maybe that can be one of our maybe I can do that in one of my list of article ideas here for Story Street here coming up. So I guess maybe stay tuned if you don't want to listen to us talking so much because we tend to ramble. Go ahead and maybe check out storystreetwriters.com for the future article version of this. For me, I think my main takeaway is going to be just to work Christopher Walken into as a character in every one of my stories now. So, because yeah, you just.
Mark
But
Calda.
speaking of, yeah, there you go. More. Speaking of, I guess takeaways, you're getting too close to the hour. So, unless anybody had some other wants to jump in first, but we can go ahead and start going around the horn and talk about the next week. All right. Who's first?
So,
Okay.
so I'm going to go with a continuation of last week. I've got some business to do, and I realized some of the business of writing to do, and I realized as we were talking that what's been holding me back is a lack of confidence to the degree that I could think of it as fear. And it's really a fear of failure more than this belief that I can't do it. And I just can't live like that. I can't do that. I refuse to do that. And so one of my goals this week is going to be writing to a person who is influential in the somewhat influential in the movie industry. And instead of just writing and saying, "Hey, can you have a look at this?" He's the one who asked me to send him something. So my second message to him is going to be, I would like to develop this short film into a longer film with someone. Are you interested in doing this with me? And just like make the sales pitch to him for this piece of writing. It's not going to hurt because the odds are he's going to say no one way or the other. So it's not going to hurt, but it might help. And so I'm going to do that. And also from Michael's idea, I'm going to try to write some as my brother, and kind of get into that character, but also have memories of him. And that's my second goal for the week. So I've those two things. Something to write and something in the business of being a writer to accomplish this week.
I can go. So for next week, I'm going to share my story with my writing group so that I can have it ready to go when it's time. And I'm going to expand the other short story that I have not completed, and I have to write an article for Story Street Writers for Wednesday. And I'm thinking about resurrecting that novel that I mentioned earlier, and just I know that I have to make some changes and just making an outline. I think that that would help. Just give me an idea of where I need to go and what I'm gonna keep and what I'm gonna modify. But that's gonna be my next project because I also think that it's a great story and I want to move forward with that. And yeah, so that's my week.
I'm good. I'm going to go while my dog is taking a break from barking. I have given myself a break from feeling frustrated about writing an article, and I signed up for April 10th. So I'm going to brainstorm ideas this week about what articles I can write for Story Straight. And I'm also going to work on rewriting that chapter that I shared with my writing group yesterday. It's half a chapter, I think. But I'm going to work on doing those edits right away while everything's fresh in my mind.
All right, I am going to do a little bit of writing every day. Just like I'm going to do the little micro fictions. And I'm talking like it might be like 50 words, 50 to 250 words. Like they're going to be small and they're just completely low pressure. And if it's not every day, that's fine too. But just aiming for every day. I'm going to do that. And I've got another book review that's almost finished, so I just need to wrap that up. And yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to be this week. Oh, the other thing I wanted to do is I want to submit some more, so I'm going to send out some submissions.
I also want to continue with the submissions because that's waiting for. I don't want to wait just for the next submission party. I'm going to keep going with this. So, yeah, that is something I think. I like the idea of continuing to do that though. The submission party every month. So just keeping that in the front of the mind. And I am going to continue doing the writing, the daily writing ideas here. So I don't, for whatever, I don't think of it as a journal, and I also don't want to think of it as a habit because there's like connotations or feelings of resistance or obligations or how do I build it into a habit. I just want to just kind of make space for it, and it's not going to be. So I'm going to continue to try and do that as well, and maybe I'll end up finding some cool short story ideas out of that can expand. So yeah, that is my next week. Did we get everybody? Yeah. I think it's been a great talk. I'm really happy with the ideas that we had, and I think there's probably a couple of things that we could explore in future discussions or in future articles on Story Street Writers .com, and look forward to kind of engaging with that a little bit more and maybe putting some of these to, because there's some good ideas. It might help me. I mean, it'll definitely help me. So anyway, if anybody else has any other final words, otherwise, I think we've come to we've come across the room. We've come to the door. It is time to open and go through to the rest of the week. So if we can continue that metaphor on the other side. Everybody who may be watching this in the future, anybody who might have jumped into the chat, thank you guys for joining us. We hope this has been, as useful to you, to somebody out there as it is to us. If you do find it useful, try and join it live if you can. Just be fun to say hi, engage with this, give us a chat. Check out storystreetwriters.com. Check out our newsletter. You'll make sure that you get the postings of all of these after the fact and any articles and future writing contests. We're coming up about halfway through March. The end of the month here, we're going to be posting the results of the last writing contest, the springtime writing contest on Story Street. So looking forward to that. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, everybody. It was inspiring.
There's the stop. Okay.